tätig, also ist da tief in den Fragen involviert. Ich habe gestern gelernt oder heute Morgen gelernt, dass die Universität gerade auch den Nobelpreis in Physik erhalten hat, also renommierte Institution, und von daher freue ich mich sehr, dass wir den Blick über unseren Horizont hinaus machen können. Bruno?
Guten Tag. Ich spreche nicht Deutsch, pardon. So I will speak in English. I have to disclosure many things. As you say, Jörg, I have been a member of the Transparency Committee, which is similar to your GBA. I am consultant in statistics and market access for many pharmaceutical firms. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and this is a conflict of interest. Why? Because in my country, in private practice, when my colleague see a new patient, during 1 hour, they receive 50 euro from the Social Security. 50 euro, and you know that we reimburse Zolgensma at about 500,000 euro. So on one way to treat one kid, on the other way, we could have 10,000 hours of child and adolescent psychiatrists. And of course, this is completely crazy. And why do we do that? We do that because we are fascinated by high-tech medicine. We are fascinated by high-tech medicine because we believe that technology will be stronger than death, and this is not true. We are all going to die, and this is good news for the next generation. I am sorry in advance. As you notice, I am likely to be rude with many of you. I know that there are some patients here, some representatives from pharmaceutical firms, some colleagues statisticians. I will be very naughty with all these persons. But we are in some kind of family therapy here. And you know that in a family therapy, we have to say the truth. And I have also my political opinion, which is mentioned here. So indeed, we are in a changing paradigm. This is quite simple. As you know, 50 years ago, the percentage of the GPD dedicated to health was much smaller, and it is true also in Germany. I know that. And it has increased, and this had a very strong consequence. For many years, it was very easy to have access to new medication. Why? Because we had more and more money, and on the other way, you know, there was Blockbuster at that time. And Blockbuster, for public health, this is very good, because you can treat a lot of people just with one pill. So it is good for public health, and it is good for evaluation, because statisticians love big sample size. So, for decades, evaluation were easy, and it was open bar for new treatment. There was a new treatment, there was a big randomized control trial, results were quite good, we take the drug, and that's life. And since the beginning of the 21st century, things are very different. We have no more money, and we have so-called targeted treatment, and so small sample size, and so evaluation become difficult, and patient and pharmaceutical firms say, there are restrictions now, and this is impossible because we have no access to innovation. Perhaps. So, what is reality? Are evaluation more difficult at the moment? I agree with that. I agree because for a long time, there was only a question of approval. Once a drug was approved in France, it was automatically reimbursed. But as you know, today, this is definitely not the case. And the paradigm of evaluation for pricing and reimbursement is totally different than the paradigm for approval. For approval, you know, EMA and FDA, when there is a placebo, this is not a major issue. But for a payer, a placebo is a nonsense. You know, we never treat people with placebo, or exceptionally. And so if you compare a treatment to a placebo, this is a nonsense. And so, because most trials are done for approval, we have trial against placebo, we have to do indirect comparison that are very fancy for statisticians, but are useless in terms of information. Because of targeted medicine, we have small sample size, and because we have small sample size, we have low statistical power. Because we have low statistical power, we are obliged to have surrogate endpoints, and so we have no idea about the real efficacy or effectiveness of drugs. And because for many reasons, people consider now that single-arm studies are interesting. And because single-arm studies are interesting, they are done, and there is approval with single-arm study, and after, how can you evaluate relative effectiveness when you have only a single-arm study? You use historical control because this is the only way to do. And of course, as you know, when you compare a drug to historical controls, the level of evidence is very low and you don't know what is the real interest of the drug. Quality of life is very important in France and in Germany, but how is it measured at the moment? You give only questionnaire to people during 5 minutes in the waiting room and they feel the feel, and then you have missing data, and how can you interpret data? Quite impossible. And today we know that we need real-life study and cost-effectiveness analysis. So we do real-life study and cost-effectiveness analysis, but in fact this is much less simple than to do a randomized controlled trial, much more difficult to interpret. And because in fact pharmaceutical firms do this analysis, they are likely to be biased, and there is recently a very interesting paper in the BMG which shows that ICR evaluated by pharmaceutical firms are biased by about 30% as compared to ICR that are estimated by institutions. Okay, so evaluation are difficult. What about restriction? Are there really restrictions? On one way, yes. We spoke yesterday about reimbursement, and indeed this is potentially an interesting drug in lung cancer. Lung cancer is a very severe disease, and so there is a promising drug that arrives with a single-arm study, blah 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 blah, and the Transparency Committee said, no, this is not possible. This is not possible. We have very poor data, no comparator, and an effect that is questionable, and so even if the disease is particularly severe, we cannot have this drug. And so indeed, perhaps there is a restriction. But on the other way, there is Yescarta, and Yescarta, this is exactly the same thing. A single-arm study, historical control, big words we have seen with propensity score, but propensity score with a sample size of 100, this is not serious, this is just a keyword. And ASMR was 3, and so the drug is reimbursed at a very high level, and the economic evaluation, our colleagues from the HA, they say, okay, but it is more than 100,000 euro per quali, and perhaps up to 400,000 euro per quali. This is very high. There is a question about collective acceptability, etc., which is true. And even we paid it. Why? Because we are fascinated by cell therapy. This is fashion. And it shows that France is able to buy the new drug that is sexy. This is not public health, serious public health. So, okay, you see, all this is not really scientific. This is very emotional, me and them. So we have to take a step back and to see more in detail this change in paradigm. This is not so simple, and I propose a systemic perspective. The change in paradigm, in fact, comes from modification of the society, which is some kind of post-modernity things. Post-modernity, you see, before there was modernity, universalism, etc., and you know that today universalism is a naughty word. Every people is a unique individual. There is a book in France which is called Safe Like a King. It summarizes perfectly what we see in our society and in our clinics. All our patients are king, they are clients, they need everything. And this is not possible. And this is not serious, and patients are not clients. If patients were clients, the price of the consultation for a child and adolescent psychiatrist wouldn't be 50 euros. And so there has been something extraordinary on a marketing point of view, the notion of orphan disease. You know, when you have orphan in front of you, you cry. Because poor little guy, they are alone. And because of that, and because in the past, this is true, there were no drugs for people with orphan disease. I agree with that, and it was not correct. But it turns exactly on the other way after there was no limitation of money for orphan disease. Okay, so this is a political decision. It's not up to me to decide if it is wrong or bad, but what happened at that moment? Everybody now is likely to have an orphan disease. Because of genes. Because of genes, your tumor is not, even if it is a lung cancer, in fact, you know that this is not really relevant on a physiopathological point of view. You have a lung cancer, but you have a lung with this gene, and more you will have a precise phenotyping or genotyping of your disease, and you will have an orphan disease. And even when you break a bone, in fact, you don't break your bone exactly that the other patient in the department. And so surgery is personalized surgery, and psychotherapy is, of course, personalized psychotherapy. Everything is personalized. Everything is orphan. And so, because there are monoclonal antibodies, and that are personalized, then we have now only drugs that are given to patients with orphan disease, because everybody is happy with that, excepted people who pay the drug. And physicians have also their responsibility, because when you prescribe a blockbuster, you prescribe a drug like everybody else. When you prescribe a monoclonal antibody, you are a very serious guy. So, and there is also the other part of the coin, which is about the question of high evidence standard. Evidence-based, you know, we accept drugs or treatment, and also non-pharmacological treatment, if there is a high evidence standard. What does it mean? Do you know the definition of evidence? A proposition is proven when it is established by a recognized methodology and leads to a belief. This is the definition of evidence. And in fact, the notion of evidence involves sociological and psychological consideration. And we have decided for long that statistics will say the truth about what is a good evidence or not. And if you look at in the details about the beginning of the notion of inference in statistics, there has been two seminal papers, one written by Fisher in 1922, the other written by Neyman and Pearson in 1928, and they say things that are totally different. And there has been a struggle during 50 years between each other. And after, statisticians only forget that for mathematical reason. And this is why, at the moment, I am sure that most of you sometimes are a little bit in tension with the results of clinical trial or epidemiology. You know, in clinical trial, you have a hierarchy of type 1 error, etc., etc. In epidemiology, you never have that. Why? Why in epidemiology, people never respect type 1 error? One, in clinical trials, this is just the opposite, etc., etc. Because there is really a problem, an epistemological problem about inference in statistics. And in fact, as I wrote at the end, the use of statistics in medicine at the moment is more some kind of rhetoric of a social ritual. There is a social ritual which is, I do an experiment, at the end I have a conclusion which says that I am right or I am wrong, and this is particularly important for approval or for market access, which are black and white decisions. And because these are black and white decisions, we want statistics to say black and white. To say that statistics are like mathematics. They say that things are true or wrong. And this is not right. Of course, statistics never do deduction, just induction, soft induction. And even we are not completely sure about this induction are. And so in a way, this question of high evidence standards is rhetorical. And now there is another part of rhetorics which comes from molecular biology. And why there are single-arm studies in with some cancer treatment? Because the mechanism of action is so fascinating that it is supposed to lead to a belief. And this is also rhetorical. Now, in about 5 minutes, how to move forward. At the HAS, recently, pharmaceutical firm and the Ministry of Industry said to the Autorité de Santé, we have a problem with innovation. You are too strict with the evaluation of treatment. And they asked to the HAS to initiate a work about new clinical research methodologies, etc., etc. I was a part of this reflection. I don't think this is secret, because this is science. And what was the conclusion that is likely to be published as a paper? I was very surprised with my colleague statisticians. They say, but in fact, there is no possibility to change because statistics are statistics. And the t-test is a t-test. And to have a statistical power, you need a sample size. And to have causality, you need randomization. And so, we are in a dead end. On one side, and I heard that with the previous presentation, treatments are changing. On the other side, you have statistics that say business as usual. And so it seems to be a dead end. Well, we come back to the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that Zolgensma costs 500,000 euros and the consultation for a child and adolescent with psychiatric problem is 50 euros. This is the elephant in the room. And so the elephant in the room, to sum up, is that we put too much money in medtech. This is just reality. And the COVID shows that. The COVID shows that. We know, I know this is particularly true in France. I know this is true in Germany also. Nurses, for instance, are not paid enough. And there is a burnout with healthcare professionals. And more special, why do we pay medtech too much? Because, in fact, we do not evaluate them appropriately. And my opinion is that phase 3 trials are useful, but they are not cost effective. Phase 3 trials have very poor cost utility. Why? Because they cost a lot. You know that phase 3 trial can cost up to 300 million of euro. One trial, 300 million of euro. They are not good to assess side effects. Everybody knows that. They are not good to target which patient is likely to benefit more to which treatment, because it requires subgroup analysis, and you know that randomized controlled trials are not good with subgroup analysis. They are done most often in very curious countries, and so in Germany or in France, because it is more difficult to do randomized controlled trial, we don't know the efficacy of drug in our own country. And it is more and more impossible to do them correctly. Why? Because of targeted drugs, they are small sample size, and with small sample size, it is difficult to do randomized control trial. And pharmaceutical firms say, this is not possible, so we use only single-arm studies. So the question is, why do we do randomized control trial, phase 3 randomized control trial? Because we statisticians love them, because of theoretical purity. This is true. This is quite pure and very convincing. Because of power, if I have worked during 20 years the methodology of randomized control trial, if people say suddenly they are useless, what did I do during 20 years? Firms love big phase 3 trial because it costs a lot, and so small pharma are not able to do this trial. And because health authorities now, they know randomized control trial, if suddenly you say, no, this is no more useful, they will say, so what? I succeeded at least to understand phase 3 trial, and now you say to me that this is useless. And the addition is that people believe that they don't pay for phase 3 trial because it is the pharma that pay for the phase 3 trial. But of course, we pay in the drug the cost of the trial. At the end, we pay the trial. So, and this is quite in line with what I heard before. How to do, I think that we have to accept simple solution, and simple solution are that phase 3 trials are no more useful. We have to switch to big cohort studies. And in short, that pharmacoepidemiology is the future of HTA for many reasons. For reason of real-life access to data, for sample size, subgroup analysis, etc., etc. What is the main problem of that? The problem of that is that pharmacoepidemiology is less robust to conflict of interest. Because you have to use models, and when you do models, it is very easy to design the model in a way that is good for you. And it is some kind more difficult with a randomized control trial. So, what is the solution? And I think this is my last slide. The solution, which is something which is a dream, this is a fantasy, but we are here to discuss about fantasy. I suggest that after phase 2 trial, EMA give preliminary approval. And after, we should plan some, I call, post-approval pre-market access centers all around Europe. That is medical center, where there are physicians that are likely to prescribe drug, but in a very standardized way, with medical files that are homogeneous all around Europe, etc., etc. And they will accumulate data, and once there will be enough data, there will be statistical model to compare the new treatments to the other one, and to have a decision about a definitive approval at the European level and the market access authorization at the national level. And I add in a democratic way, because at the moment in France, the decision of reimbursement is done only by physicians. A group of 15 physicians that vote for reimbursement, which is crazy because physicians have conflict of interest with disease, not with money, but with their patient. You know. And so I know this is quite better in Germany, but this is a real question. I heard about patient association, and I do agree they are important, but you know, association of patients with HIV have not the same power as association of patients with schizophrenia. This is just obvious. And so there is here a real democratic problem. At the end, who decides which treatment is reimbursed where do we put money to nurse, to blockbuster, or to high-tech medication? And of course, at the end, who pays and who takes the industrial risk? I agree at the moment, firm takes the industrial risk, and this is, everybody considers this is normal, but firm on the other way, we say, we take the risk, so we take the money if the drug works. Because if the drug doesn't work, we lose money, and it makes sense. And so if we change the paradigm, then nations, we have to take the risk instead of pharmaceutical firms. Thank you for your attention.